This morning I'm talking about spiritual leadership in the new era. Leadership. I became introduced to the word leader and leadership many, many years ago. Maybe 20 years ago. And ever since then, it has been a kind of an enigma with me to think about leadership, to recognize leadership in myself and leadership in others, and just what it really is. I remember reading in one of Torquem Serdarian's books where he said that I'm paraphrasing him, that you come in as a leader. You're born as a leader or you're not. And I thought that was very interesting. And so working with the group life, spiritual life, I've recognized over the years where some people just have an inherent leadership in them and others don't. And it doesn't mean whether they're smart or not smart, or whether they are dedicated to their work, to service. It's something inside them that is awake. And that something is spirit. The more spirit that is alive and functioning and manifesting in the nature of that person is what makes their leadership. That you're going to recognize there is something in them that makes them a leader. So if you just take the word spiritual and out of that word take the word spirit, and spirit is true life. It's the authentic life. It is called the self, the capital S self. And the more that self is in expression in a person's life, the more leadership they have. They can lead behind the scenes. They can lead a country. Or they can be the strength behind their family. It's very interesting to see how the spirit of leadership really functions. Now, moving into my talk this morning, the teachings tell us that true spiritual leadership brings people from darkness into light. Now, if we take this idea of spirit, which is truth, which is light, which is the capital S self, which is pure light, then true leadership is to bring people from their darkness into light. It's inherent in them. So when we want to recognize whether that person is a leader by design, meaning by their education, by their vanity, by their desire for power, versus an individual whose spirit is so alive, so active, so fiery, so beautiful, you're going to see the difference simply by which one is bringing people from darkness into light. So you can look at the heads of nations and you can recognize by that nation whether the leader is a spiritual leader or one who is enslaved by the desire for power, let's say. interesting to think about. The ageless wisdom, step by step, reveals what darkness is and what light is. The teaching explains darkness in this way, very specific. You know, it's not just a general term. You don't just say, oh, that person is dark or that country is dark. The teaching is really specific in identifying and defining what darkness is. And it starts with selfishness. So when you see a leader who is dressed in selfishness, you know they're not a spiritual leader. See, the reason I'm trying to bring this out is so that you'll recognize the difference between a religious leader and a spiritual leader. So, a true spiritual leader, as I said, is to bring people from darkness into light. Well, we have to recognize what darkness is. Darkness is selfishness. So your true spiritual leader is going to bring people from their selfish selves to their true self. See how that works? Separatism is another aspect of darkness. I'm just going to repeat myself here so we really understand the point that when you see a leader, let's say the head of the family or the head of a country, the head of an organization that tries to divide their people or tries to separate this organization from that, or this religion from that religion, or this culture from that culture, they're the opposite of spiritual leadership. They would be a pseudo-leader that is trying to divide religions, trying to divide cultures, trying to divide peoples. The spiritual leader is the opposite of separatism. Then we go on. Hatred, egotism, and vanity. So selfishness, separatism, hatred, egotism, and vanity are all major elements or components of darkness. The actions of darkness. So this is why I think many people on the spiritual path say there's still a little bit of darkness in me. And what they mean by that is that they still have ego. They still have vanity in them. They still have Maya and glamour and illusion in their personality life. So we ask ourselves, why do we have this bit of darkness in us when we are working so hard to bring people from darkness to light? I think that these, what I call particles of darkness in us, have been carried over from ancient lives. And other particles are formations of what we call glamours and illusions. So, what is so beautiful to me is that I don't think it's all that bad to have these particles of darkness, because in a sense, it keeps us in balance so that we're not, what do they call, holy-poly, you know, and we're not going to stand on the street corner lassoing people into our guruship because we are so pure and holy. Sometimes I think if a person has no darkness in them, they're either the Christ or they're not here. They haven't reincarnated into this planet. They're on Venus, the planet of love. So don't feel badly. At least we're not supposed to feel badly if we find a particle of darkness in us, because it makes us want to work, to strive, to better ourselves. And in that process of bettering ourselves, in our spiritual leadership, we are bringing people from darkness into light. through our example. So light, in a sense, is living a sacrificial life. Light is expansion of consciousness. It is the examples of beauty and goodness and joy and freedom. This is what light is. So it doesn't say light depends on what church you're part of, or what Bible you believe in. This is generic to all humanity. Light is expansion of consciousness. It's beauty, it's goodness, it's freedom, it's joy. This is what the prayer that we say each week means when we say, "Lead us, O Lord, from darkness to light, from the unreal to the real." Releasing more and more light from within is our goal. Releasing our divinity. On the way over here this morning, I was listening to TED Talks on my Sirius XM, great radio in the car, and thinking about, people that live a self-sacrificial life. What is an example? It was so incredible. I learned about an organization that's called Create Text Line, TEXT, the Create Text Line. And this organization was formed by Nancy Lubeline. And I just wrote this down. If you have yourself or anyone or you want to participate in some way in this worldwide organization, you text 741-741. And the stories that these volunteers were telling about the teenage lives that they are saving, that teenagers, of course, this is the best way to reach teenagers and for them to reach you is through texting. And the lives that are being saved with these kids through the text line is just overwhelming to me. Some of the stories about they're such a well-organized entity that through algorithms, they have certain key words that they recognize that's being texted by this kid, adults too, I'm assuming, but the stories I heard, were young people that are ready to, take their lives. And once they see these specific words, they're put to the head of the line. They have a very professional person working with them. They contact the local emergency service, and somebody goes to the house. The parent is alerted. And the lives that have been saved by these volunteers is not to be believed, and you can imagine, at least I imagined, the joy that a person would experience saving a teenager's life. That's light. Hey, that's living a sacrificial life. It's not about themselves, it's about people in trouble, bringing people from darkness into light. Those are leaders. Lead us, O Lord, from darkness to light. The teachings say that things that are going to pass away, that are transient, are not going to stay after the grave, are unreal. So what is meant by that? Expansion of consciousness stays. It's real. Beauty is real. Goodness doesn't go away. Joy doesn't go away. Freedom doesn't go away. Those things that are real are things that are going to continue with us forever. Virtues such as love and sacrifice, friendship and trust, these are examples of what's real that will stay with us forever. So virtues are light. The spiritual leader of the New Age is going to lead people from darkness to light, from the unreal to the real, from death to immortality, from chaos to beauty. Immortality. What the heck is immortality? Who wants to be immortal? Who wants to live 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years? I've watched TV movies, that featured somebody that was immortal. I never want to be like that. Everybody dies while you still stay looking like you're in your 20s. Life evolves. Anyway, that's not immortality, obviously, not spiritually. So immortality is the life of the spirit. It is the spirit within. That's what immortality is. The more awakened that spirit within is, the greater the leadership is of that individuality, and why their immortality continues on. Their spirit continues on. So how are we going to build the world in such a way that people live as spirits, as immortal souls, instead of living as bodies and dollars and properties and jewels? The prayer says, from death to immortality. What is death? Everything that is done against unity is death. Everything that is done against unity is death. Holy cow, do you know, if you just take that one idea apart and you think about, just start with your family life. How unified is your thinking about your child? You may have a really ordinary child. How unifying is your thinking? Hey, when you have an aberrant child or an aberrant husband or an aberrant aunt or uncle or brother or whomever. So it's one thing to stand up here and say that everything that is done against unity goes against immortality. It's another thing to begin to live it. That doesn't mean that our aberrant child is perfect or beautiful or, the best of the best. But it means we have to work on unifying the nature of that child and the nature of the relationship between yourself and that child, or yourself and your boss, or yourself and your neighbor. That's how we are bringing people from darkness into light. So death to immortality. Death is everything that is done against unity, everything that's done against oneself. Against oneself is a path leading to death. So when you work against yourself, you're leading yourself on the path of death. When you are destroying your body from alcohol and drugs and so forth, you're working against your spirit. You're working against immortality. When you're trying to destroy somebody, you are working against their immortality, which means you are working against your own immortality, against the reason for life. It's a very deep subject to think about. Everything that is leading us to selfishness is leading us to death. See, now think about the title of today's talk is Spiritual Leadership. And you start to look at the examples in the world. I won't get into it because it's a bit of a downer, but Brazil, do you know what's happening in Brazil? It's god awful. People should be pouring out of Brazil by the thousands. People should be pouring into Brazil leaders, spiritual leaders, to bring their unity back. It's so dark. It's so dark. Everything that is leading us to selfishness is leading us to death. Everything that is identification with material values and forgetting the spiritual values is death. So what is immortality? Immortality is knowing yourself, knowing the universe, knowing that the self lives in everyone, and that there is no separatism. What does from chaos to beauty mean? Chaos is our mind, is our emotions and our physical condition. Chaos is the living condition in many countries today. Beauty is the release of our inner divinity, order, harmony, cooperation. That is beauty. It's the release of our inner divinity, harmony, cooperation, order. That's beauty. This is such an important practical prayer. And this is why we say it so often, and pardon me, I've got a little allergy going on here. So at least for myself, every time I say that prayer, it means something different. And I can always relate to whatever we've talked about, like in the Sunday talk, or in a Wednesday night class, or any spiritual conversation where we say that prayer. It takes on a whole different dimension. And I learn more and more and more what it means. Lead us, O Lord, from darkness to light, from death to immortality, from chaos to beauty. It's so amazing. Such a powerful prayer. It's a practical prayer because it is the clue to real spiritual leadership. So look at the head of your family. Look at the head of your group. Look at the head of your nation and say that prayer and see if they exemplify that prayer. If they do, you know that you have a true spiritual leader running your family, your group, your country. Spiritual leadership or New Age leadership is an effort to bring the expansion of consciousness into the conditions of life. To bring the expansion of consciousness into the conditions of life. It is to make the consciousness of humanity expand. Not contract, expand. It also means to work very hard to make our own circumstances and conditions fit to that expanding consciousness. In some really simple ways, it's like, I know people today that still don't want to learn how to use a computer. Do you know what you're missing? Some people say, no, I'm not going to get on the internet because I'll be hacked and blah, blah, blah. Do you know what you are missing? It means you are stagnant. You are putting yourself in a state of inertia. The rest of humanity is moving ahead. Whether you agree with the methodology doesn't make any difference. If you're not on the internet, if you're not on social media, if you're not involving yourself with 90% of the, and that's a random statistic, so it's not a statistic, it's an opinion, with 90% of people that are now, have computer access. that are using the computer and the internet in some way, you're not expanding your consciousness. You're isolating yourself from humanity. It's no different in my mind than the Piscean age gurus that went to the Himalayan mountains, froze to death in a cave to become spiritual while the rest of humanity was out evolving. New Age leadership is to make the consciousness of humanity to expand. The White Mountain Education Association has a group studying and writing papers on the avatar of synthesis. Recently, a member of that group posted something to that particular group entity from the writings of Helena Rourke, and who was the founder of the Agni Yoga Society and of Agni Yoga. Helena Rourke and her husband, Nicholas Rourke, who is, in case you don't know this, he was a famous philosopher and master artist. Both were examples, living examples of spiritual leadership in the new era. Examples of striving to expand the consciousness of humanity. That was the purpose of their life, of that incarnation. They encouraged us to work very hard to make our own circumstances and conditions fit in such a way that we would expand our consciousness. Expand our consciousness. Many of us, even today, are continuing to carry on their work. Now, here's the quote that this dear lady posted. Helena Rourke said that the world teacher doesn't bring an absolutely new teaching, but rather the synthesis of past teachings, and gives it to people exactly when the right moment comes. That is what Buddha did. Having given his teaching to the people, to everyone, not just one caste. But the teaching, she wrote, Helena Rourke wrote, existed before him. He just provided the synthesis. Now, here was Helena Rourke's expansion of consciousness instruction. She said, we should deepen our understanding of the significance of Shambhala. We should identify more with that name in our striving, for it has been a shield from all the dangers in the world. Torquem Saradarian, another incredible spiritual leader, expanded on what Helena Rourke wrote by saying, the new day cannot come by dishonoring and belittling the great workers who, throughout ages, by their own means and ways, tried to bring light and love and beauty to humanity. He went on to say, it is impossible to create a superior civilization and culture while crushing under your feet the flowers of beauty that have blossomed throughout all ages as messengers of light and glory. The servants of wisdom, he said, respect and worship the servants, not the oligarchs. The servants of wisdom respect and worship every diamond given by all religions, sciences, and arts. Now, I have lots more to say, and I'll only get through some of it, but this is more, what I'm going to continue on now is more talking about what the teaching has given us is 3 practical laws of life that we must try to work by so that we can awaken more of that spirit within and become true spiritual leaders. So there are 3, we could call them cosmic laws, we could call them the laws of true spiritual leadership, or just the laws of spirit. And the first law has to do with the law of economy. So you can know that what I'm going to be talking about, I can't begin to cover in depth, these laws, but these are laws we can research and study and think about, and then ask ourselves, are we practicing the laws of economy, the law of economy? The next is the law of attraction and repulsion. And the third one is the law of synthesis. When I think about these 3 laws, each law could be studied for an entire incarnation. That's the depth of these laws. And not laws that are given by the Internal Revenue Service or by a particular nation or religion. These are laws that are inherent to the spirit of life. Okay, so the law of economy is related to our physical, emotional, and mental bodies. How can we work with these bodies in a way that it will not hurt the world economy? See how simple these words are and how in depth they are going to be in challenging us to practice. To work with our physical, emotional, and mental bodies in such a way that we do not hurt the world economy, the economy of all people, which means the physical, emotional, and mental planes. I'm just so not going to get to all of this talk, but I love these stories, as they come in. I was thinking in terms of the law of economy many, many years ago. Torkim Saradarian came to me and he said, I would like to help your group raise some money. I said, okay, great. He said, here. And he handed me a manuscript, a book called Spiritual Regeneration. And he said, I would like you and your group to edit this book, to prepare it, and to publish it. Well, you cannot imagine what we learned. He planted a seed in this group to where today we are now not only publishing other books, we're translating other books into ink from Russian into English, we're publishing compilations. We have the people that know how to do this, and the computers and the software and everything all began with that planting of that one seed. But this is what I remember the most, is that when he handed me that manuscript, it was given in a notebook that looked like it had gone through World War I and World War II, and the binding was ripped off, and it was a 3-ring, notebook, and I like, and he said, now, don't you lose that notebook. The world of economy. He was teaching how to be economical. There was another time where he came to the town I was living with, and we were sponsoring him in an all-week conference. And of course, everybody wanted to have a private personal appointment with him, and so he had like 5 or 6 slots open for 100 people, and but those 5 or 6 people came in. So he came into my office that morning and sat down in the chair, and he took his book, he put it here, and then he took a notebook and put it here, and he crossed his legs and folded his hands, and he said, I'm ready for the first person. economy, physical economy, emotional economy. He didn't engage in any chatter. He just sat down. I learned so much by his actions, not what he said. So now when I go to seminars or, to teach or to whatever, I don't take 5 pieces of luggage with me. I jam everything into one suitcase, and now the suitcase is getting lighter and lighter, fewer and fewer things, because of economy, the law of economy. He taught how to bring people out of darkness into light. Law of economy. The second law is the law of attraction and repulsion. It is the most complex law. I've taken courses on this law. It's extraordinary to think about. How is spiritual leadership going to find a balance between repulsing to a certain degree and attracting to a certain degree? Now, this is the example that was given in the books. We can learn this law by watching the planets and their relationship with the sun and constellations. This law teaches us something very hidden and beautiful about balance and equilibrium. It's the law of attraction and repulsion. Teaches us about balance and equilibrium. The law of repulsion keeps the planets at one distance, and the law of attraction allows them not to go any further than here. It's like, if you've studied the planets, they all have a particular orb. They go out of that orb, they're in trouble. In a sense, we can relate to this law in our relationships. We think, how close can I go and how far of a distance should I keep? Right? There's certain people we want to draw into us, and there are certain people that need to be repulsed. So the law of attraction and repulsion also works with thoughts, emotions, and actions. Which thoughts must I repulse? Which thoughts should I attract? Which emotions should I receive? Which emotions should I repulse? Which thoughts must I bring into me? And which thoughts must I reject? In our individual situations, we must try to apply this law to our life. What activities must I do and which must I not do to keep a balance? For example, just one simple example here is fanaticism. Fanaticism leads to distortion and destruction of this law. If a planet loses the energy of attraction, it either burns into the sun or crashes into other planets because it has lost its equilibrium, like asteroids. So, the law of attraction, or law of attraction and repulsion, is balance. That's that's a foundation of understanding of this law. The balance between two energies. This is what happens to us in our individual relationships. If we are too close, we're going to burn. If we are too far away, we're going to freeze. How can we make ourselves at just the right balancing point so that we can use this law of attraction and repulsion? The third law is the law of synthesis. It is with this law that we are truly bringing in the field of spiritual relationship. So synthesis, we can see what is happening in the world. If we read the history of the world, we'll see that every person initially was working for himself or herself. Eventually, the law of synthesis, think of this, the law of synthesis touched humanity, and families came into existence. Family units came into existence. We also see that those who did not, we also saw that there are certain entities that did not respond to that touch. Then the law of synthesis, the avatar of synthesis, touched them a little more. They formed clans. Humanity formed clans and races and nations. When the law of synthesis touched humanity a little more, we saw certain nations come into existence, like the United States of America, the United Kingdom, and others. The law is touched a little more, and we now have the United Nations, even though it's still fragile. So now we are hearing things like one world, one brotherhood, one self. Don't lose sight of the law of synthesis. Don't be distracted. Don't be blindsided by this horrendous, horrible infiltration of darkness regarding refugees and immigrants. Don't let it happen. Because the law of synthesis, the avatar of synthesis, has touched humanity with one world, one brotherhood, one self. The law of synthesis and the avatar of synthesis is slowly, slowly bringing into fusion, into unity and synthesis, all that exists. This is spiritual leadership. The law of the New Age leadership is to guide the synthesizing process of the world. We must synthesize our family. We must synthesize our group, our nation. We must bring together a synthesized humanity, which is like a symphony where every note, this is important so that you don't misunderstand what synthesis is, or one brotherhood is, or one world is, or one self is. It is a symphony in which every note is different and beautiful. And if you've ever played music as a kid because you were forced to sit down at that piano, you know, to play all those notes, every note is different. But as they're working together in harmony, there is a beautiful symphony that takes place. Every note which is different and beautiful, and they are not fighting against other notes. So that every note, every measure, every movement, every rhythm is increasing the beauty of others. That is a symphony of synthesis. The symphony of synthesis. New Age leadership is to have burdens. You've got to realize this. If you are a New Age spiritual leader, part of the package that was given to you as you came into this incarnation was to have burdens, was to have duties, was to have responsibilities to help and cooperate with these laws. So don't see yourself as a victim. See yourself as the hand of the great ones. Spiritual leadership is to aid great ones. You must have the honor, the possibility, the probability to aid these great forces. This is spiritual leadership. And I think I'm just going to end right here because we're only have a couple of minutes left. And I think you have the idea now anyway of what spiritual leadership is.